Ethan had always believed his life was simple and secure, a steady rhythm of work, home, and the quiet love of his wife, Emily. They lived in a modern apartment in Chicago, and from the outside, their life seemed perfect, a happy couple, shared routines, small laughter-filled evenings, and weekends spent with friends. Yet beneath the surface, Ethan felt a growing emptiness he could not ignore. Emily had been distant for months, her focus on work and social engagements leaving him feeling invisible, as though he were fading into the background of his own life. One rainy evening, after a minor argument about household responsibilities, Ethan stormed out of their apartment, needing air and a break from the tension he could no longer ignore. He wandered through the city streets until he found himself at a small cafe he had visited once before, seeking comfort in the familiar warmth and the smell of fresh coffee. As he settled into a corner, his mind wandering, a voice broke his solitude. Clara, a woman he had met at a company networking event months ago, smiled warmly at him from the table next to his. She had an effortless charm, a kind presence that seemed to cut through the fog of his frustration and restlessness. Their conversation started casually, but it quickly drew Ethan in. Clara listened to him, laughed at his jokes, shared stories from her life, and offered insights that felt deeply personal and understanding. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt truly heard, appreciated, and alive. It wasn't about infidelity or passion, it was about connection, a human need he hadn't realized he had been missing so urgently. Time slipped by unnoticed as they talked, and the rain outside transformed into a quiet night, the city lights flickering through the cafe windows, reflecting in Ethan's eyes. Yet as the night ended and he returned to his apartment, guilt shadowed the spark of excitement he had felt. He realized the fragility of his life, how easily one small choice could unravel everything he had built. Little did he know, Victoria, Emily's mother, had been observing the cracks in their marriage from afar, not with judgment, but with a protective vigilance that came from a mother's instinct. Victoria had noticed Emily's growing distance and Ethan's restlessness, piecing together the signs no one else seemed to see. She had a presence that was quietly commanding, intelligent, and discerning, and though she appeared calm, she possessed an awareness that could pierce through lies, misunderstandings, and hidden desires. That very night, Victoria's mind was alert, connecting the dots she had patiently observed, understanding that Ethan's late nights, distracted glances, and occasional unexplained absences were not just trivial matters, they hinted at a life quietly tipping towards secrets that could shatter the delicate balance of her daughter's happiness. Meanwhile, Ethan, unaware of Victoria's watchful eye, felt both excitement and dread. The spark he felt with Clara ignited questions he had tried to ignore, questions about his marriage, his own needs, and whether he had been honest with himself or Emily about the emptiness growing inside him. The next morning, Emily greeted him with her usual smile, yet there was a distance in her eyes that matched his own conflicted feelings. He tried to brush aside the night's encounter with Clara, convincing himself it was just a fleeting connection, but his mind kept drifting back to her warmth, the understanding she had offered, and the simplicity of feeling truly seen. All the while, Victoria silently planned her next steps, considering how to protect her daughter without overstepping, aware that the slightest misstep could change everything. Ethan's world had subtly shifted, though he did not yet know it, and the first threads of a complicated, emotional, and forbidden tension were beginning to weave themselves into his life. That evening, as he sat alone in his apartment, sipping his untouched coffee, he realized he was standing at a crossroads, between loyalty and desire, comfort and adventure, routine and the unknown. The quiet of the apartment was heavy with anticipation, and Ethan sensed that his life, carefully ordered and predictable, was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. And somewhere, in the same city, Victoria's eyes watched with a quiet intensity, ready to act if needed, aware that secrets, once uncovered, could alter everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the people she cared for most. The tension between what Ethan felt, what Emily sensed, and what Victoria perceived was invisible yet palpable, a storm gathering just beneath the surface, hinting at emotional confrontations, hidden truths, and the heart-wrenching choices that lay ahead. The night ended with unanswered questions, quiet reflections, and a subtle understanding that life had shifted, and nothing would be the same again. Ethan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest after that night at the cafe. The excitement he felt around Clara clashed sharply with the loyalty he owed Emily, and every day at home seemed heavier than the last. Emily remained absorbed in her work, often staying late at the office or lost in her own world, leaving Ethan feeling more isolated than ever. It was during this growing tension that Victoria, Emily's mother, decided it was time to intervene. Victoria had always been composed, elegant, and wise, the kind of woman whose presence commanded attention without raising her voice. She had noticed the subtle changes in Ethan, his distracted demeanor, the occasional missed dinner, the way he avoided eye contact at times, and she understood that these were not signs of a perfect marriage in balance. One afternoon, she invited Ethan over to her home under the pretense of discussing Emily's upcoming birthday party. He arrived unsure of what to expect, feeling both nervous and guilty, and was greeted by Victoria's calm, knowing smile. The conversation began casually, but soon Victoria's words cut through the air like a sharp, careful blade. "Ethan, I know something has changed," she said softly, her eyes studying him intently. "I'm not here to accuse you, but I need honesty." Ethan's pulse quickened. He had never expected to be confronted by his mother-in-law with such directness, and yet there was no anger in her voice, only a quiet, formidable authority. As he fumbled for words, Victoria continued, explaining that she would protect her daughter no matter what, but she also had the ability to reveal any secrets that might hurt Emily. The weight of her statement hung in the air like a heavy curtain, and Ethan realized how vulnerable he was. The encounter left him shaken, his mind racing with fear and guilt, but also with a strange, unspoken admiration for Victoria's clarity and control. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself constantly thinking about their conversation. He tried to navigate his feelings, to return fully to his marriage with Emily, but the tension between him and Victoria lingered in the background, subtle and unrelenting. Every time they spoke, there was a quiet intensity in her gaze, a reminder that she understood more than he wanted her to, and that she held power over his choices in ways he could neither ignore nor confront. At the same time, Ethan began noticing small things he had never paid attention to before, the way Victoria moved with grace, the calm confidence in her voice, the warmth that sometimes surfaced in her otherwise composed demeanor. He struggled with these feelings, knowing they were inappropriate yet unable to stop the pull he felt toward someone so close, so entwined with his life. Victoria, too, was aware of the change, though she did not act impulsively. She recognized the danger of what was stirring between them, the fragile boundary between concern, attraction, and emotional intimacy. She had always seen Ethan as a good man, a devoted husband, but now she glimpsed the vulnerability he tried to hide, the longing for connection and understanding. That went beyond his marriage. One evening, Victoria invited Ethan to help her organize some family photos. As they worked together, sorting images of past celebrations, vacations, and milestones, the atmosphere grew lighter, yet charged with a quiet energy neither dared to name. Small touches, hands brushing accidentally, shared laughter, meaningful glances, left Ethan both exhilarated and fearful, as if walking a tightrope over a precipice he could not see. The emotional weight of his life pressed down on him, loyalty to his wife, the growing connection with Victoria, the guilt of past mistakes, and the thrilling, terrifying realization that someone so close could understand him in ways Emily could not. The boundaries were shifting, and Ethan's heart was caught in the tension between duty and desire. Meanwhile, Emily remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath her family's surface, absorbed in her work and planning, trusting her husband and mother entirely. Victoria's strategic mind kept her from acting recklessly, but she also understood that every interaction with Ethan had the potential to awaken feelings neither of them could easily suppress. The days passed with small, intense moments, a shared joke, a meaningful look, a fleeting touch. Each encounter built a silent understanding, a bond that was emotional, intimate, and complicated. Ethan realized that Victoria's quiet influence over him was profound. She could make him confront his desires, fears, and loyalty in ways he had never faced before. The tension between them was no longer subtle, it was palpable, yet carefully restrained, hidden beneath the surface of family interactions and polite conversation. One evening, as Ethan left Victoria's house after another discussion about Emily's birthday plans, he felt a mixture of relief, longing, and anxiety. The emotional entanglement had deepened, leaving him restless and confused. He understood the stakes. A single misstep could destroy his marriage, shatter family trust, and reveal secrets that could never be undone. Yet, paradoxically, the danger itself was part of the allure. That night, lying awake in his own bed, Ethan reflected on Victoria's words and the subtle power she wielded. He realized that she was not just a mother-in-law or a protective guardian, she was a mirror, reflecting his own hidden desires, insecurities, and longings back at him. He also recognized that the emotional thread connecting them was growing stronger, delicate but unbreakable, a quiet tension that could explode or transform, depending on choices yet to be made. As the city lights glimmered outside his window, Ethan felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down, but also the undeniable thrill of emotional connection he could not escape. Victoria's shadow lingered in his thoughts, her quiet intelligence and unexpected warmth weaving into the fabric of his daily life. The story of loyalty, temptation, and unspoken attraction had begun to unfold, a careful dance between caution and emotion, as both Ethan and Victoria navigated a complex landscape of heart, morality, and desire, setting the stage for events that would challenge their understanding of love, family, and the boundaries of the human heart. Ethan's life had become a maze of tension, guilt, and unexpected emotion, and each day brought him closer to a truth he could neither name nor escape, the spark he felt around Victoria was growing stronger, though he tried desperately to dismiss it as fleeting, an innocent emotional bond born out of shared family concerns. But every glance, every moment they spent together seemed to carry a weight that neither could ignore, and it terrified him as much as it thrilled him. Victoria, for her part, felt a pull she had not anticipated, a curiosity mixed with concern, as she saw the man she had always viewed as her daughter's devoted husband revealing a depth of vulnerability that was magnetic and painfully human, and she struggled with emotions she had never allowed herself to feel, a quiet longing that existed alongside her protective instincts for Emily. They found themselves caught in small, charged moments, helping Emily with preparations for an event, reviewing family albums, or simply sharing a quiet cup of coffee, moments that felt ordinary to anyone else but carried an intensity that neither could fully explain. A brush of a hand, a soft laugh, or a lingering look became enough to send Ethan's heart racing and Victoria's thoughts spinning, creating an invisible tension that neither dared to name aloud. One evening, Victoria invited Ethan to assist with some organizing in her home, and as they worked together, their conversation drifted from practical tasks to personal stories, childhood memories, regrets, hopes for the future, and each revelation peeled back layers of understanding and empathy between them, forming a quiet intimacy that was both comforting and dangerous, a connection that existed in the shadows of family duty but shone with emotional intensity. Ethan found himself confiding in Victoria about fears and frustrations he had never shared with Emily, about the loneliness that had been creeping into his marriage, and about the small moments when he felt disconnected from the life he had once cherished. In turn, Victoria shared her own experiences of love, loss, and the subtle compromises that life demanded, creating a space where honesty and emotional vulnerability could exist safely, yet undercurrents of attraction threaded through every word, charging the air with unspoken possibility. Their meetings became more frequent, though always framed under the guise of family duties or friendly conversation, and with each encounter, Ethan noticed the small, nuanced qualities in Victoria, the softness in her voice when she laughed, the thoughtful gaze when she listened, the warmth in the way she touched a hand briefly or guided him gently, that drew him in more powerfully than he wanted to admit. Simultaneously, Victoria felt a mixture of fascination and guilt, torn between the ethical boundaries of her role as a mother and the undeniable pull of a connection that had grown far beyond casual concern. Late one night, a phone call from Victoria stretched into a conversation that lasted hours, covering topics from work to personal fears to memories of times that shaped them, and by the end, Ethan was left breathless, emotionally exposed, and painfully aware of a bond forming that was intimate in its depth, emotional in its intensity, and yet impossible to categorize. He realized that the feelings he harbored were not fleeting but real, complex, and potentially life-altering, even if they could never be acted upon openly. The days blurred into one another, each interaction layering more tension and subtle attraction onto the foundation they had already built, creating a delicate balance of longing, restraint, and emotional dependency. Ethan found himself thinking about Victoria at odd times, replaying their conversations, noticing how her advice and presence had begun to fill gaps in his life he hadn't known were empty, while Victoria too felt the quiet ache of anticipation and the forbidden thrill of emotional closeness that contradicted every moral and social boundary she had ever respected. Amid this growing closeness, practical life continued unabated. Emily remained unaware of the intensity brewing beneath her family's surface, absorbed in work and unaware of the emotional storm quietly escalating. Ethan wrestled with guilt daily, knowing that every moment of connection with Victoria, while emotionally significant, could destroy the trust he shared with his wife. Yet he could not bring himself to sever the bond entirely, as it had become a lifeline of understanding and empathy he desperately needed. Tension reached a new peak one evening when Emily proposed a family weekend getaway, unknowingly placing Ethan and Victoria in close proximity for hours on end, a situation that promised to bring every suppressed feeling to the forefront, testing boundaries, and challenging their self-control. During preparations, every touch, glance, or shared laughter between Ethan and Victoria became more pronounced, electric with subtle meaning, as if the universe itself had orchestrated the circumstances to force them to confront the emotions simmering just beneath the surface. That night, as Ethan and Victoria found themselves alone for a brief moment, the conversation turned unavoidably personal, touching on loneliness, unmet desires, and the complexity of human emotion, and in that quiet space, words became a bridge between two hearts, their connection deepening in a way that was tender, vulnerable, and unspoken, leaving Ethan breathless and Victoria equally unsettled, both acutely aware of the dangerous intimacy developing but unable to resist the pull entirely. The emotional stakes heightened with each passing day, as both recognized the precarious nature of their growing bond, a mixture of longing, guilt, and fascination that neither could fully rationalize. They navigated the delicate dance of restraint, each interaction a balance between desire and morality, comfort and danger, secrecy and honesty, knowing that the wrong step could unravel not just their relationship, but the very family they were intertwined with. Ethan began to understand that his feelings for Victoria were not just emotional curiosity, they were a reflection of his own unmet needs and vulnerability, a mirror revealing parts of himself he had ignored for too long, and Victoria realized that her growing affection for Ethan was similarly complex, tied to empathy, admiration, and a subtle recognition of emotional resonance that transcended simple attraction. By the end of the week, as the city lights dimmed and Ethan walked home after another emotionally charged encounter, he felt a mixture of exhilaration, fear, and uncertainty, acutely aware that the line between emotional connection and deeper desire had been blurred, yet he could not turn away from the bond that had formed. Victoria, equally reflective, considered the implications of their closeness, the ethical constraints, the protective instincts for Emily, and the undeniable human need for connection that had drawn them together, understanding that the coming days would demand clarity, restraint, and perhaps choices that would redefine their relationships entirely. The story at this point had become one of emotional suspense, subtle attraction, and moral complexity, a careful weaving of longing, vulnerability, and unspoken connection, setting the stage for a weekend that promised revelation, challenge, and the testing of every boundary Ethan and Victoria had so far maintained, leaving both characters and the audience at the edge of anticipation, eager to discover how hearts intertwined in secrecy might navigate the delicate terrain of loyalty, desire, and unspoken love. The weekend arrived, bringing Ethan, Emily, and Victoria to a cozy cabin tucked away near the lake, a place meant for family bonding but instead charged with silent tension that neither Ethan nor Victoria could ignore, each glance and shared smile loaded with the emotions they had been quietly suppressing, and from the moment they arrived, the air between them felt electric, a careful balance of normalcy and unspoken understanding that made every interaction feel both thrilling and dangerous. Emily, cheerful and unsuspecting, busied herself with unpacking and organizing, laughing and chatting as though the world outside their cabin did not exist, leaving Ethan and Victoria to navigate the subtle, emotionally charged spaces between them, aware that every shared joke, every casual touch, and every lingering look carried a weight they could not afford to acknowledge but could not deny, the very presence of each other a mirror to feelings that had been building over months of clandestine connection, emotional vulnerability, and mutual understanding. As the day moved forward, they went for a walk along the lakeshore, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in oranges and purples, and in those quiet moments, Ethan felt the pull of Victoria's presence stronger than ever, the warmth of her hand brushing his as they passed a fallen log, the softness in her laugh echoing against the water, creating a moment that was innocent on the surface yet charged beneath with the emotional intimacy that had grown between them, a connection neither could fully articulate but both felt deeply, a blend of longing, curiosity, and restraint that left Ethan's heart racing and Victoria acutely aware of the fragile boundaries they were tiptoeing along. That evening, after dinner and while Emily retired early, Ethan found himself in the living room with Victoria, ostensibly helping to clean up and discuss plans for the next day, but the quiet of the cabin allowed a more personal conversation to emerge, one that neither of them could escape. They spoke softly about their fears, their regrets, and the unexpected ways life had taught them about vulnerability and human connection, each word a thread weaving them closer together emotionally, a tension that was not physical but no less intimate, a connection born from months of shared glances, conversations, and unspoken understanding, all under the weight of secrecy that heightened the intensity of every moment. In the dim light, as the cabin grew quiet, Ethan realized that the bond he shared with Victoria had become something he could not ignore, an emotional truth that existed alongside guilt, loyalty, and moral conflict, a complex web of feelings that forced him to confront parts of himself he had long buried, including the need for understanding, empathy, and emotional intimacy he felt his marriage lacked at that moment, while Victoria, equally aware, grappled with the delicate balance between desire for connection and the ethical boundaries she could not cross, feeling the silent thrill of knowing that Ethan, too, shared this internal struggle, that their hearts had begun a private dialogue that no one else could understand or witness. They talked late into the night, the fire crackling beside them, sharing stories of loneliness, heartbreak, and the human longing for emotional recognition, each word bringing them closer in a way that transcended conventional labels, a pure and tender closeness that was powerful precisely because it was kept secret, nurtured under the constraints of morality, and yet impossible to ignore, leaving both Ethan and Victoria suspended between guilt and yearning, craving a connection that could never be openly acknowledged but could not be denied emotionally. The following morning brought the family together for breakfast, with Emily cheerfully orchestrating plans and chatting as though nothing had shifted, and Ethan and Victoria shared a quiet, loaded glance over the table, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming in secrecy, the intensity of which neither of them could allow to surface aloud but which remained unbroken, unspoken, and emotionally transformative, a reminder that connection and understanding could exist in the spaces between words and actions, in fleeting moments, and in the shared knowledge of hearts that understood each other deeply. Throughout the day, small interactions heightened the tension, Victoria offering to help Ethan with a firewood pile, their hands brushing briefly, the laughter shared over minor accidents, the meaningful pauses in conversation that left room for emotion to linger without needing expression, all building an invisible bridge between them, a network of unspoken feelings that defied explanation yet felt intensely real and irrevocable, creating a narrative that was both emotionally satisfying and dramatically tense, the kind that held a viewer's attention and pulled them into the subtle complexities of human relationships, moral dilemmas, and forbidden yet tender affection. As the weekend progressed, Ethan and Victoria found more moments of quiet alone, each one a delicate dance of restraint, longing, and emotional exploration, testing the boundaries of propriety while deepening a connection rooted in empathy, understanding, and shared vulnerability, a bond that left both questioning what they wanted, what they could accept, and how far they could allow themselves to feel without shattering the family trust. The climax of the weekend came on a quiet evening when, under the pretense of helping with dinner prep, Ethan and Victoria found themselves alone in the kitchen, the cabin's warm light highlighting the seriousness and tenderness in their expressions, and in that private space, they allowed themselves to speak freely, admitting feelings of loneliness, longing, and emotional connection, without acting on anything physical, yet acknowledging that their bond was real, meaningful, and transformative. A secret that would shock the world if revealed but which, for now, remained safely contained within the confines of their understanding, leaving both feeling simultaneously exhilarated and burdened. The weekend ended with the family gathering for departure, Emily cheerful and unaware, Ethan and Victoria exchanging a final glance, a subtle acknowledgement of the unspoken secret that had grown between them, a delicate emotional thread that would continue to shape their interactions, their choices, and their understanding of love and human connection. It was a secret that shocked no one externally but transformed everything internally, a story of longing, restraint, and emotional intimacy that left hearts forever altered, a narrative of maturity, romance, and drama that resonated deeply, proving that love and human connection often exist in shades of gray, hidden in moments of empathy, understanding, and quiet, unspoken desire, leaving both Ethan and Victoria changed, and the audience captivated by the depth and tenderness of a secret relationship that challenged boundaries while remaining fully emotional, romantic, and heart-stirring.